The Kansas City Chiefs are back-to-back Super Bowl champions, and they stand alone atop the NFL. How can the Baltimore Ravens dethrone them? All that and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, in audio form, wherever you get your shows. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, so Monday through Friday, every single week, plus some bonus content on the weekends and live shows after every piece of Ravens big news. And we also go live after every game. Well, that's not going to happen for a while now. We bring you that Ravens content. So if you're new to the channel, welcome in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the follow along button. If you're on YouTube with us in audio form, be sure to follow along as well if you like the content. If you're an everydayer here, welcome back to the show. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back in as well. Hopefully stay a while. You can hit that subscribe button too if you haven't already. It is there, and it helps bring new fans, new Ravens fans, and NFL fans to the show. So I really appreciate that. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Prize Picks. This is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code lowercase LockedOnNFL for first bust and match up to $100. We're back here. It is a Monday, and we are now without football for the next, 6-7 months as the Kansas City Chiefs defeat the San Francisco 49ers in Super Bowl 58, 25-22. Turned out to be a really, really good game. It was kind of a clunker in the first half, but was really good in the second half and overtime. So we're going to be talking about, Kansas City's at the top of the NFL right now. They're back-to-back Super Bowl champions. Patrick Mahomes is a 3-time Super Bowl champion. Kansas City's alone there. And we're going to talk about how Baltimore can dethrone them today. We're also going to be getting into, is next year Baltimore's year? We're going to talk about a lot of things, and that will transition us into the final part of the show, which is the offseason officially begins. And how we do stuff on Locked On Ravens, even in the offseason, we're 5 days a week. So you don't have to worry about us taking breaks or taking hiatuses. I've been doing this show since 2019. I've never missed an episode in my 4+ years of doing this show, and I don't intend to anytime soon. So we're going to be talking free agency, talking the draft. We'll be starting up our mock drafts Mondays and Sundays here on Locked On Ravens next week. I always do it the week after the Super Bowl. So we're going to be talking about how the Ravens can build up this team and hopefully get to the Super Bowl and win it next season. So let's talk about the Super Bowl champions, though, and the Chiefs, as they did win again against the San Francisco 49ers, and got to give credit to them. I don't think Kansas City was the best team in the NFL this season. I still think that was Baltimore, but it doesn't matter if you're the best team in the regular season. If you're not the best team in the playoffs, you can't get the job done. And Kansas City, I think, tightened up in the playoffs, and they just played, for the most part, mistake-free football and capitalized on others' mistakes, including in the AFC championship game with Baltimore, which we're going to move past it. We'll, of course, reference it when we need to, but the season's over. We're in off-season mode. I'm not going to dwell too much more on the championship game. Yes, it still stings. It still hurts. It's still awful, but we can move ahead now and kind of focus on the off-season aspect of this. And you know what? How Baltimore's going to go and beat Kansas City next season, which who knows? Maybe they're going to play week 1. Since Kansas City is playing Baltimore, they're going to be playing at Arrowhead, and maybe Baltimore will be that week 1 opponent for Kansas City. But here's how I think you start in terms of just how do you dethrone Kansas City? Because it's not just, you can win in the regular season and, you're dethroning them. No, you have to, if you face them in the playoffs, you got to dethrone them that way. They're a 2-time Super Bowl champion. One, you have to play mistake-free football, right? I think any game against Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, the way their offense was this year, it wasn't necessarily as high-powered as we had seen it, right? We hadn't seen them in the years past, right? It was Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce wreaking havoc, and they had good complementary receivers. They weren't like 5 deep or anything, but they had complementary guys. But this year, it wasn't really that way. It was a defense that carried them, and Mahomes obviously did his part, and Kelce stepped up in the playoffs when it mattered. But to me, if you're the Ravens, you have to play mistake-free football, and you have to be ready for the moment. I don't think some Ravens players, some Ravens coaches were ready for the AFC Championship moment. And if you're back there, even if it's a wild card game, just a playoff atmosphere against Patrick Mahomes and company, they have been there, done that before. and done it plenty of times. Now, Lamar Jackson obviously has playoff wins under his belt. He has 2 of them now, but Mahomes obviously has a lot more than 2 plus the 3 Super Bowls. Patrick Mahomes has more Super Bowl championships than Lamar has playoff wins, right? And Mahomes obviously got a little bit of a head start there, being drafted earlier. But regardless, it's still, the sentiment still rings true. I also think if you want to talk about a roster building perspective, how do you defeat Kansas City from a roster building perspective? Baltimore has a lot of high IQ football players on their team, but I think just bringing in as many high IQ guys as you can, right? Because Mahomes can outsmart you. Andy Reid can outsmart you. And again, I'm not saying Baltimore didn't have, most all their players, very high IQ players. But to me, I think that part of it's just a chess match, right? And in that chess match, there are going to be times throughout a game where you have to be mentally strong and you have to be able to go and do your job. And I think Baltimore did do that, but then there were some moments where I think in the moment people shrunk, and that was just what it was. Plus, I do think you have to be able to generate pressure with 4 and Patrick Mahomes. You cannot blitz Patrick Mahomes. We know you cannot blitz Patrick Mahomes. And I think the Ravens do have that if they bring back Justin Madubuike. I think Travis Jones is going to have an increased role next season. Do they bring back Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney? We'll get into that as the second and third segments of our show come here. But those are all really, really big questions when you're talking about Kansas City because Mahomes picks apart the blitz. Honestly, a lot of quarterbacks do nowadays. I think quarterbacks are getting smarter. Not every quarterback is good against it. I do think there's still some definite quarterbacks who struggle against it. Lamar struggled against it at times in the playoffs, but that doesn't mean he didn't pick it apart when the opportunity presented. In the second half of that Houston game, picked it apart. But then you saw some of the moments where, he didn't play as well against the blitz. And I think it's okay to say that because, again, my job here on Locked On Ravens is to praise when praise is deserved and criticize when criticism is deserved, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat things when they aren't supposed to be sugarcoated. I'm not going to go and overly criticize a guy when it's not fair. So to me, Baltimore also has to be able, it's part coaching too, right? We can't get away from that, where I am still very curious, especially with what we saw late in that San Francisco game, where San Francisco was able to control the clock with their run game, just Baltimore running the ball. And part of that is being able to win up front. We don't know what's going to happen with Chris Jones in the offseason with Kansas City. Maybe he comes back. I would do things to get Chris Jones in a Ravens uniform next to Justin Madubuike. Those two would, just incredible. But regardless, you have to be able to win up front with your front 5. You have Tyler Linderbaum. Kevin Zeitler's not there right now. Apparently they're in talks, but nothing's official yet. So they don't have Kevin Zeitler. But if they bring back Kevin Zeitler, then you have 2 of your 5 positions set. We don't know what's going to happen with Ronnie Stanley. We don't know what's going to happen with John Simpson or Morgan Moses. But against that Chiefs defensive front, it's going to be big. And also, I think the wide receiver thing, too. The Ravens last year, they had Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham as their top 3. For me, I think, if you have Zay Flowers next year, you have him as your 1. And then with Odell, you could make a case to bring him back and have him just as here's my thing with Odell. I think Odell is good enough in some moments to be, a wide receiver 2 on this team. But you're going to have Bateman next year, whether you accept or decline the 5th-year option. But the Chiefs have Trent McDuffie. They have Justin Reed. L'Jarius Sneed is a free agent. We're going to see what happens with him. But you have to be able to win that way because with Steve Spagnuolo, what he wants to do, he knew that his front wasn't great, right? He knew that. So what he did against Baltimore and San Francisco was he gave these heavy pressure looks and heavy box looks and said, all right, you won't want to run on this. Why would you run on this look? We're going to bait you into running on it. So we stop you a couple times, and then you're going to keep giving you that look. So you say, okay, well, we're going to throw the ball now into the teeth of the defense, essentially, which was the secondary. So you have to have receivers who can win those one-on-ones. Zay, if he's back, is a great route runner, right? 100%. So was Rashad Bateman. I think Rashad Bateman gets the short end of the stick on some of this stuff because while the production hasn't been there, he has been getting open. Lamar just hasn't been finding him. I'm not saying Rashad's been perfect, but I do think there is more that meets the eye with Rashad Bateman here in terms of his actual production over the course of his career versus, what the eye test actually says about him. So there are ways for the Ravens to dethrone the Chiefs, right? I'm not saying there's not, but you have to be able to play your game. You can't have mistakes. That's both on the field and with the coaching staff. You can't do it. And that's what makes the Chiefs so dangerous, is because they're just such a cerebral team and they rarely make mistakes in big moments. I'm not saying they haven't done it. Obviously, in that Tampa Super Bowl a couple years ago, what was the formula? The offensive line for the Chiefs that year was atrocious. They literally, Kansas City that year, went into that offseason, replaced all 5 linemen on their line because they knew it was that bad. You have to be able to beat Kansas City and take advantage of opportunities, something San Francisco did not do in the Super Bowl, something Baltimore did not do in the AFC Championship. Buffalo couldn't do it the way they needed to in the divisional round. In Kansas City, as we saw, they either get out to a small little lead here or they hang around. And so I think Baltimore does have, if they add here, they bring back some key guys, they're going to lose some guys, right? They're going to lose, I wouldn't expect Patrick Queen back, wouldn't expect Geno Stone back, etc. But they have horses. I think they have a shot to do it, but it starts with playing mistake-free football. It starts with playing your game, with Lamar Jackson stepping up in the big moments, with John Harbaugh not abandoning his identity, right? All those things are into one. That's how you dethrone a team like the Chiefs, who were so hard to beat. And to me, look, it's the Chiefs until it's not, right? It's like the Patriots. It's the Patriots until it's not. So how do you stop that dynasty? You have to play a really good game, almost perfect, to beat that team. And like any given Sunday, right? But Kansas City's showing, and they have here, that look, with back-to-back Super Bowls and with 3 times here for Patrick Mahomes, it's one heck of a team. And Ravens have some work to do in order to be able to dethrone them next season. Coming up, though, we will talk about if next year is Baltimore's year. So be sure to stay tuned. Plan to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. So the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks offers an awesome injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Football and basketball games, we have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second. That player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Plus, Prize Picks is really simple to play. You can make your picks over there and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. For me, no football games, obviously, but I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy. And I think with Nikola Jokic, you're in pretty safe spaces there, pretty safe territory if you pick more on any Nikola Jokic number on Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for first buzz match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for first buzz match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We're back for our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Monday after the Super Bowl. We're officially footballless. It stinks to say. I mean, look, I love football. Obviously, if you're watching this, you probably love football too, right? You'll hopefully love the Ravens, or even if you don't, you're welcome in here to Locked On Ravens as we kind of debrief here with the Super Bowl. Any Ravens fan, NFL fan is welcome here on this show. So if you're enjoying the content, be sure to hit that subscribe button, follow along in audio form as well. You can do video form, audio form, however you prefer to listen to your content. Same show, both audio videos. They're not missing out on any of our content 5 days a week, always on Locked On Ravens. But a big conversation is how good of a chance Baltimore had to win the Super Bowl this year. I argue that this was the best chance that Baltimore had in the Lamar Jackson era, and even dating back a few years prior to the Lamar Jackson era, depending on how far you want to go. This was Baltimore's best shot in a really, really long time to win the Super Bowl. The roster was there. The coaching staff was there. The performance, for the most part, was there. There were some hiccups along the way, but Baltimore was by far and away, in my opinion, the best team in the NFL this season. But as I have said, and I literally said it earlier in the show, being the best regular season team gets you nowhere. It's a step. What you have to be is the best team in the playoffs. And even if you're not the best team in the playoffs, you got to find ways to win in the playoffs. And the Ravens did not do that in the AFC Championship game. So now we flip the page, and is next year Baltimore's year? Well, I think there are some questions that we have to answer first if we're going to talk about is next year Baltimore's year. I think, first of all, you got to look at the Ravens themselves. And we'll talk in the final segment about the offseason and, what the Ravens have in store there from a free agent perspective, from a draft perspective. But whenever you have Lamar Jackson, you have a chance, right? That is a fact. But I do think that Baltimore has their work cut out for them because they have folded in the big moment multiple times here, and whoever you want to blame. And I'm not one to blame one coach or one player or put 50 things like, oh, well, it's only one person's fault. It's not, I think part of the blame does fall on John Harbaugh. Part of the blame does fall on Lamar Jackson, on Todd Monken this year, on Greg Roman in previous years, right? We've had those conversations. We'll continue to have those conversations. But if it's going to be Baltimore's year next year, they are really going to have to figure out what their identity is. Because look, we thought they had an identity this year, right? They were a ground team. They've been a ground team really since the Lamar Jackson era started. And consistently in big moments, they have moved away from it. And John Harbaugh says, well, that's just the way the game went. They presented heavy looks, but the Ravens are some of the best in the league at conquering heavy looks, right? You bring in Patrick Ricard, you bring in big bruisers. You have Baltimore use the 6 offensive linemen with Ben Cleveland or Patrick McCary a ton this year. And they didn't play to their strength. If it's going to be Baltimore's year, you use what got you there. And players, coaches, everybody has to step up in the big moment. Eric DeCosta has to have another offseason like he did last offseason. Absolutely sublime offseason from Eric DeCosta. Really, the only miss I would say Eric DeCosta had last offseason was Rocky Ya-Sin, right? And it didn't even matter that much because they had other guys step up so big like Arthur Millette and Ronald Darby and Brandon Stevens. But it was hit after hit after hit after hit. I mean, depending on how you feel about Odell, I thought Odell was fine. Like, again, wasn't a wide receiver one or anything. And again, with a $15 million contract up to $18 million, of course, those numbers, when you look at it from a base perspective, didn't live up to the expectation, but there was a lot more that went into that. But regardless, Baltimore has to, again, with Lamar on that contract, with some of the other big contracts that will be or already are going to be in effect, you have to hit on your mid-round draft picks and your early ones and late ones, of course. But you got to be able to sign those Jadeveon Clowneys and Kyle Van Noy's and Millett's and Darby's and all Nelson Aguilar's. Got to be able to hit on them. And it's easier said than done. Now, Eric DeCosta has definitely earned my trust with it, right? I'm not doubting him because with the offseason he had, I mean, how can you? He was that good with it. But the other question you kind of have to ask is, it's not just about Baltimore. Obviously, Baltimore can control what they can control, and they play who's in front of them. But let's look at the AFC for a second. We just talked about Kansas City and how they are 1,000% the team to beat. Doesn't matter how good Baltimore was in the regular season. You have to respect Kansas City. They are the team that you circle. They are the champions. They are the back-to-back champions. That's the number one team in the AFC, and you cannot argue against it. Even though Baltimore had the best regular season, doesn't mean anything because Kansas City is the one hosting Lombardi. But what about the other teams? Let's start in the AFC North, right? Cincinnati's going to be getting Joe Burrow back, and we're going to see what happens with T. Higgins and some of the other guys that they had. They obviously lost Brian Callahan as their offensive coordinator. But with Joe Burrow back, it's a big boost for them. Cleveland's getting Deshaun Watson back. Now, I think that's much less of a boost than Joe Burrow. I'm not in on Deshaun Watson. I'm not a Deshaun Watson guy for multiple reasons, but Joe Flacco played better than Deshaun Watson. So what does that mean? But Cleveland's also going to get back other guys too. They were very snake bitten. Nick Chubb is going to come back. That's a huge part of their offense. Maybe they add some wide receivers. Steelers, who knows what's going to happen at quarterback. I saw something that they were going to sign Ryan Tannehill. I don't know how true or real that was, but it goes with the theme of Pittsburgh with, even if it's not Tannehill, I expect them to add a veteran quarterback to try to take advantage of their defense and how good it is with guys like Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, etc. Got to take advantage of that group. I think they're going to have to add some corners for sure, but we're going to see how they perform with Watt, obviously Alex Highsmith, and what ends up going on with that. And this is why I think it stings so much that the Ravens lost. And again, not to get too far back on the subject, but we have to be realistic here, where every season is different. There's no guarantee that, in fact, there is no guarantee at all. It's not going to happen. The AFC is going to be different next year than it was this season, with teams stepping up, other teams falling, and you're going to have teams that maybe weren't in the conversation last season. They're going to step up, and they're going to be in the conversation. What does that mean for Baltimore? Plus, from a health perspective, I'm talking about all these quarterbacks coming back, like Justin Herbert, for example. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, where's he going to end up? You see these guys come back. Health is going to be a huge part. Health is a huge part. And we can say that this Ravens team, from a health perspective, in 2023, didn't suffer a ton of season-ending injuries, but they weren't necessarily healthy at the end of the season. I mean, look, we can admit Mark Andrews was not 100%. Marlon Humphrey was not 100%. But who's to say that the health situation, because Baltimore had most of their guys for the big games, not that they were all healthy, but there were only probably 3 key contributors on IR, maybe 2.5. J.K. Dobbins, Keaton Mitchell, and David Ojabo. Those were the guys. Are the Ravens going to get that lucky health-wise next year? Maybe they do, but it's not a guarantee. You look across the other parts of the AFC, Buffalo with Josh Allen, always going to be a threat. What are they going to do with Stephon Diggs? New York, Aaron Rodgers, that's a big storyline. New England, I'm not necessarily putting them as a threat, but crazier things have happened, so we'll see. Obviously, Miami, they're going to get some guys back as well from injury, and they have some talent there, but I don't think Tua's bad, but I'm not sold on him. Then look at the AFC South. This is where I'm really intrigued. CJ Stroud's a dog, absolute baller, and that team getting Tank Dell back, they can make some moves around the edges. CJ being in year 2, D'Amico Ryans being in year 2, they're my pick to win the AFC South next year. Jacksonville, got to figure out what's going on with Trevor Lawrence. They're going to get Christian Kirk back, so that's a team you got to watch. Colts with Anthony Richardson's a dark horse for a lot of people. Then Tennessee with Will Levis. How's that going to look? And then in the AFC West, we talked about Kansas City, but Los Angeles with Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert coming back. We talked with Sean Merriman about that here. He's very excited about that pairing. The Raiders with Antonio Pierce seem to have found something. Maybe they get a quarterback, and that looks a lot down. I'm not a Jimmy G guy, so we'll see. Then obviously the last team in there is Denver. We'll see what happens with Russell Wilson. And then you got to look in the NFC, right? If Baltimore makes the Super Bowl, San Francisco is the top dog there, but then you have Dallas and Philadelphia and Detroit. There are going to be so many teams here. So Baltimore, it can be their year. Baltimore's a talented team. I expect them to be in the playoffs and be really good next season, but it's not going to be the same as 2023. Maybe it's better. Maybe somehow it's better, but there's no guarantee that Baltimore has these things go for them. So that it's such a year-to-year league, so fragile in the NFL. I think Baltimore has a shot 1,000%. As I said, with Lamar, you have a chance, but we're going to see how it pans out for him. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the offseason officially beginning, getting into Baltimore's free agent list, the draft position, and a lot more. Stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, this episode is brought to you by DoorDash. And what a football game that Super Bowl was. I actually thought it was really good, but as usual, the commercial stole the show in my book. There were a lot of good ones, and DoorDash ran a lot for the game day and DoorDash stuff, from all the ads to one lucky winner, cars, snacks, even tax software. And somehow they pulled it off. I'm a little bummed I didn't win personally, but I got to hand it to them. It was one heck of a delivery. Now, DoorDash is the all-in-one app for your everyday needs, from restaurants and groceries to flowers and gifts. So next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or just time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered. And whatever watch party or anything party you've got coming up, get it delivered with DoorDash. Football season may be over. We're still in the thick of basketball games, the school year, and let's face it, even winter. I can think of a million reasons daily to order DoorDash. Hop on the app and make your day a little easier. Get dinner for the night, groceries for the week, or a consolation prize for your sad friends in whether it's Baltimore or San Francisco, all on DoorDash. DoorDash, your door to more. Head to the DoorDash app and get everything you need delivered. We're back. It's our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still talking with you here on this Monday. Really appreciate you tuning in here and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We are 5 days a week of Ravens content plus bonus content. We do live shows. We're doing a bunch of content in the offseason. I'm really excited for it. So if you're new to the channel, would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel on YouTube, or if you're here in audio form, it's your first time, be sure to follow along wherever you get your podcasts, or anywhere you get those shows. Same show, audio and video. Plus, of course, if you're an everyday or you're tuning back and you've been here before, really appreciate you and the support here. We've been going strong here for a while on Locked On Ravens, and I'm really excited to keep growing and keep building. Just a side note for content, Lamar won the MVP. Obviously, we reacted to it on Friday, but on Saturday, Aaron Schatz, who was the one MVP voter who did not vote for Lamar Jackson, he joined us, and he gave his reasoning for why he didn't. So if you want to check out that, really good episode. And we're just going to continue going on Locked On Ravens now about the offseason, because it's officially here, and there's a lot to get into, because Baltimore has so many free agents. And I'll read the list out here, and then we can talk about them. But it's going to be a big offseason. Baltimore's free agents: Odo Beckham, Kevin Zeitler, Gus Edwards, Rock Ya-Sin, Nelson Aguilar, Patrick Queen, Tyler Huntley, Jadeveon Clowney, Geno Stone, Ronald Darby, J.K. Dobbins, Josh Johnson, Justin Madubuike, Darrell Worley, Brent Urban, Laquan Treadwell, Devin Duvernay, Malik Harrison, Delshon Phillips, Arthur Millette, Trayvon Mullen, John Simpson, or Darius Washington. Now, that's a big list, right? Really important players on that list. Obviously, the big three, I call them Justin Madubuike, Patrick Queen, and Geno Stone. But then you have other ones that are important, right? Kevin Zeitler, we talked about. It's going to be really interesting, the running back position, what they do with both Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins there. I mean, you have Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell's obviously going to come back at some point, but do you bring in a Derrick Henry, right? Would you bring Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs? Those are a bunch of rumblings that were going on throughout the trade deadline. So we'll see, and we'll figure that out. But of course, with everything here, as I mentioned in the first part of the show, building up on the offensive line, they have a couple of guys who could maybe fill in for John Simpson if they decide not to bring him back, or maybe they decide to move on from Ronnie Stanley. That's another thing, too, where they can free up some money. Baltimore doesn't have a ton of current cap space right now, but obviously there are ways for them to free up some with restructures and post-June 1 cuts. Plus, you have guys like Tyus Bowser, who I don't think is going to be around. That saves you some money. If you move on from a Patrick Ricard or a Morgan Moses, those save you money as well. Stanley obviously gives you a lot of dead money, but does give you some cap savings. So there is something to look at with that. Plus, you have the 30th overall pick. So second to last pick, or I guess third to last pick at the end of the first round. That's going to be one where if I'm the Ravens, I'm probably trying to trade out of that, honestly. Pick up as many picks in the top 100 as you can. You can trade back from 30 to maybe 35, and then you pick up an extra second or third with that deal. To me, I think that's going to be important. I understand you lose the fifth-year option if you don't pick in the first round, but I think the value of fifth-year options have actually declined in recent seasons. Not that they're not valuable, but I do think with the new rules and how they're accolades-based and performance-based instead of a flat rate for a pick, it can drive up the price. And, for example, the Ravens have decisions to make on both Odafe Oweh and Rashad Bateman when this offseason ends up going. I forget when the actual deadline is for that. I can't remember right now, but when that happens, I mean, obviously the Ravens declined the one for Patrick Queen. He balled out. Now, unfortunately, he's probably leaving Baltimore. So we're going to see, because Baltimore right now, I believe they're in line for a fourth-round compensatory pick from Ben Powers, but they're going to lose the sixth-round pick they were projected from Josh Oliver because they signed Nelson Agholor. So they were going to have two. They signed Nelson Agholor. They're going to only have the one now. Look, a sixth-round pick for the production Agholor gave you, I'd take that 10,000%. So Baltimore has a lot of questions they have to answer, but to me, you retain guys, obviously Lamar and Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Tyler Linderbaum, etc. The list goes on there. You have a good base of elite players. Now it's adding around them, bringing back your other elite players. Like, again, I don't see how you can let Justin Madubuike walk out the door. He is just that valuable to you. He is too valuable. Interior pass rush is so hard to find. He picked a heck of a year to have. His breakout year, by the way. Now, as I've talked about on this show before, I'm a little interested to see how the franchise tag would work for him if there's no extension. Obviously, for him, it would be $20.9 million is projected. I think he cleared 25 annually from his performance. Now, you have until July to work out an extension for the franchise tag, so of course, maybe that's just what they do and that's what happens. But I'm not sure I play on the franchise tag if I'm just Madubuike. So that's another question they have to answer. A long offseason ahead for the Ravens, 1,000%. We're going to see it. All these storylines intrigue me because this is one of the more important off seasons in Ravens history. I think last offseason was obviously huge with the Lamar extension and everything that went down with that. But how do you respond after getting the first we have in this era and unfortunately falling short? If they fall short again, could result in even more changes. And obviously at the top of that list might be parting of ways with John Harbaugh. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But a lot of offseason content ahead for you on Locked On Ravens. Really excited for it. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube. Follow along in audio form as well. Plus on Instagram, trying to start that up again. So you can follow me there at ChaosStricker34. I'm on Twitter at ChaosStricker34 as well. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning in. Come up tomorrow, more Ravens content. Of course, stay tuned for that. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.